Good evening, curious minds. Welcome back to Somnolent Conspiracies, the place where every whisper can become a scream. Tonight's dossier begins not with a scream or a body, but with something far more deceptive. A half-finished cup of cold Venetian espresso, abandoned, unremarkable, until its final dregs began to dry. What remains in the porcelain bottom is not simply residue. It's a message, a cipher, one that leads us down crooked alleys, into silent chambers, behind the locked doors of palazzos where truth curdles like spoiled milk. And somewhere along that trail, beneath masks and marble, beyond canals and centuries, something waits. If you've ever stared too long at your coffee, wondering what it knows about you, this file is for you. So dim the lights, steady your breath, and when you glimpse the last oily swirl at the bottom of your own cup, ask yourself, what secrets have I yet to taste? Because tonight we follow the code. And in Venice, not even the shadows walk alone. Part 1, the chilled espresso. Venice stirred under a slow gray dawn, its canals barely whispering beneath centuries-old stone. The tourists were still dreaming in overpriced hotels, gondoliers not yet singing, and pigeons still waiting for crumbs in San Marco Square. But in a cluttered office above the Grand Canal, where fog kissed the window panes like a lover trying to forget, Detective Luca Verdi was already awake and irritated. He sat hunched at a desk strewn with paper stacks, half-cracked case files, and a cold macchiato abandoned the night before. It had left a brown ring on a folder marked unsolved. Fitting. Luca pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled. Another sleepless night following dead ends, chasing whispers from the art underworld that had grown too quiet for comfort. A cryptic phone call at 2:37 a.m. A disconnected line, a single word, Rinaldi, then silence, the kind that gnaws behind the eyes. He reached for the cup. The ceramic felt chilled in his palm, like a forgotten relic pulled from a crypt. He sipped, bitter, sour, thin, just like the leads in this case. He was about to toss it into the waste bin when something odd caught his eye. At the bottom of the espresso, in the muddy swirl of drying crema and grounds, was a faint but unmistakable shape. Not just a blotch, not a coincidence. Pattern. He tilted the cup toward the window, letting the filtered light scrape across the inside. The ring of residue bent into curves and angles, forming what looked disturbingly like letters. L. N. R. D. No, wait. R-I-N-A-L-D-I. His breath caught. Rinaldi, who are you? He whispered aloud. A name, spelled in silt and stain. Not scrawled in ink. Not scratched into wood. Just there. Like someone had poured a riddle into his drink. He placed the cup gently on the desk and stared at it like it might move again. The window rattled as a vaporetto motored past below, sending tiny tremors through the floor. His office smelled faintly of wet wool, printer toner, and the bergamot cologne that his last assistant used to wear. She'd quit 2 months ago after seeing a drowned man smile at her from a morgue slab. He opened the center drawer and retrieved a pocket magnifier. Holding the espresso cup steady, he leaned in close, so close his breath fogged the rim. It was no random pattern. The grainy stain had curled and congealed into the clean strokes of a name, with such precision that it couldn't be accidental. But how? Who? Was it the barista? A prank? A chemical trick? Or a message? His fingers twitched. He'd seen codes hidden in paintings, Latin phrases embedded in Baroque symphonies, even a smuggled gemstone wrapped in communion wafers. But never this. He flipped open a clean notebook and wrote one word in dark ink, underlined twice. Rinaldi. The name clawed at his memory like something half-remembered. Hadn't there been a painter by that name? Or was it a smuggler? He scanned the room instinctively for connections, like the answer might be taped to the walls. Maps of Venice, aging sketches, newspaper clippings. Nothing jumped. His old analog wall clock ticked with labored slowness. 6:42. Luca rubbed his jaw. The first vaporetto to Castello would leave in 20 minutes. He didn't know why that mattered yet, but something about the shape of those letters made him think of the Sestiere districts, 6 puzzle pieces that made up the map of Venice. Castello, San Marco. Canarijo, San Polo, Dorso Duro, Santa Croce. 6 zones, 6 directions, 6 chances. The espresso stain hadn't just spelled a name. It had pointed a direction. He just didn't know which yet, but he'd find out. He closed the notebook, slid the espresso cup into a padded evidence pouch, and stood. Below, the Grand Canal's water reflected the dawn like a mirror of melted coins. A coffee stain had just opened a case colder than the cup it came from. And Luca Verdi, against every instinct screaming go back to sleep, grabbed his coat. Part 2, Encrypted Residue. The water taxi rocked gently as it cut through the green-gray veins of Venice. Detective Luca Verdi sat hunched near the window, cradling the espresso cup in both hands as if it might whisper something more. The stain inside hadn't faded. It had settled, sharpened, like whatever message it carried was growing more confident by the minute. The name still stared back at him, Rinaldi. He knew the city was full of ghosts. Names painted over, identities rewritten. But this one itched under his skin. As the boat bumped softly against the dock at Fondamenta Nove, Luca disembarked, taking a side alley where tourists rarely wandered. He reached his makeshift lab, a borrowed room inside a former apothecary shop, abandoned since the pandemic and left untouched, except by him. Inside, the shutters barely held back the rising sun, giving the room a cathedral hush. Luca set the espresso cup beneath his USB microscope, adjusting the light ring until the pattern glowed across his laptop screen. Zoomed in, the dried residue no longer looked organic. It had structure, angular edges, repeating bars of tone. A cipher. He narrowed his eyes. The stain wasn't just forming letters, it was forming layers. Thin lines nested inside one another, with deliberate spaces, like someone had encoded a substitution alphabet into the ring. He pulled out an old chart he kept for fun. Classic cipher wheels, Caesar shifts, and monoalphabetic patterns. After a few test overlays, something clicked. The residue's loops matched the Venetian merchant codes of the 17th century, a crude but elegant symbol substitution system used by smugglers to mark crates without writing names. Letters disguised as brushstrokes, meaning hidden in decay. He traced the sequence backward, penciling each decoded letter onto a fresh notepad. S-E-S-T-I-E-U-R-E-D-R-I. He froze. Sestiere D. Of course, the city wasn't just floating on water. It floated on divisions. The Sestieri, 6 historic districts, each with their own secrets buried beneath years of fog and plaster. His hands moved faster now, decoding the remaining symbols. The pattern curved sharply, narrowed, then thickened into a small, definitive hook. He followed the residue down to its end. Castello, Sestiere di Castello, the largest of Venice's sestieri. Quieter, older, once home to the shipbuilders' arsenals and plague hospitals. Now a quiet maze of moss-covered stone, where sunlight struggled to land and alleys folded in on themselves like whispered regrets. It wasn't a location that screamed tourist intrigue. It whispered buried history. Luca leaned back and stared at the finished sequence. Rinaldi, Sestiere di Castello. It wasn't random. Someone had chosen to leave this message. In this cup. For him. But why through coffee? And why the name Rinaldi? His mind drifted. That name, it had lingered before. Not from the art world, but from something stranger. In a cold case file. A list of minor gallery contributors who went missing in the late 1980s. Some had connections to smuggled reliquaries. Others were simple patrons who vanished without explanation. One of them, Giuseppe Rinaldi, amateur restorer, disappeared near Castello. His last known purchase? A chipped marble statue with a missing wing. Luca's heart knocked once against his ribs. He glanced down at the cup again. Suddenly seemed heavier. He pocketed the espresso cup, zipped up his coat, and slung his satchel over one shoulder. If Castello held the next breadcrumb, he'd follow it. Whatever game had started at the bottom of his coffee cup, it was his now. Outside, the city was shaking off its sleep. Gondoliers were prepping boats. Bells were ringing from a distance. But Luca only heard the name in his head, looping like a threat or a prayer. Rinaldi, who are you? And more urgently, what's waiting for me in Castello? He stepped back into the fog and walked toward the past. Part 3, Whispers at Dawn. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly as Luca stepped inside. It was just past 7 a.m., and Campo Santa Maria Formosa was still cloaked in the pale hush of morning. The air smelled of damp stone and roasted beans. Faint jazz leaked from a dusty speaker behind the bar. The cafe was empty save for her. Aria Fontana, mid-30s, hair tied in a quick bun, eyes sharp enough to slice citrus. She wore a green apron stained with years of espresso splatter and resilience. A steaming tamper in one hand, she looked up and stiffened slightly. "Detective Verdi," she said, not quite surprised, not quite pleased. Luca nodded. "Didn't mean to startle." "You didn't," she replied, tamping the coffee with a practiced snap. "You always show up when things get strange." Luca took a stool at the far end of the bar. The seat still bore the imprint of someone else, recently gone. He tapped the espresso cup pouch in his coat but didn't take it out. "Not yet. I need to ask you about something," he said. "A name. And a drink." Aria's brow furrowed, but she didn't stop working. She loaded the portafilter, locked it in place, and hit the switch. The espresso machine hissed like a cat disturbed from sleep. "Name? Rinaldi." The stream of coffee slowed. Aria turned the machine off. For a moment, only the jazz remained. "I served that name last week," she said. "He paid in cash. Wore gloves. Didn't speak." Luca leaned forward. "What did he order?" "Cold brew," she said. "Expensive blend. Asked for it to be left to sit. Said it tastes more like truth when it chills." Sounds poetic. Sounded practiced. Aria reached under the bar and retrieved a small metal token, wrapped in a napkin. "He left this behind. I was going to toss it, but something about it." She unwrapped the napkin and placed the token on the counter. Luca stared. It was about the size of a coin, but heavier brass or perhaps something older. On one side, an engraving of a winged lion, mid-roar, crowned and haloed. Around the edge, faded Latin script that circled like a warning. On the other side, smooth, featureless, except for a hairline groove. Not worn, cut, deliberate. He didn't touch it. Yet, "I've seen that symbol before," Luca muttered. "So have I," Aria said quietly. "In books that don't sit on library shelves." Luca looked up. "Where?" She hesitated. Then, "My uncle. He was part of a restoration guild before the museums started digitizing everything. They had meetings, late, quiet, private. He used to call it the Order of the Lion's Wing." Luca blinked. That wasn't a name he'd heard in years. Aria took a shaky breath. After Rinaldi left, the espresso machine jammed for 2 days straight. Lights flickered. One of the pigeons outside flew into the glass, dead. And my dreams started to smell like coffee. Cold. Always cold. Luca finally picked up the token. It pulsed faintly in his fingers, or was that just his own blood? He pocketed it. "I think," Aria said, voice thin, "whatever you found at the bottom of your cup isn't done with you." Luca didn't respond right away. Then he asked, gently, "Why didn't you go to the police?" "You're here now," she said. "That's enough." He stood, sliding a €10 note onto the counter. Aria made no move to take it. As he reached for the door, she added, almost as an afterthought, "Detective." He paused. She looked him dead in the eye. "Don't drink that brew again." Part 4, Gallery of Suspects. Luca stood across from Galleria Leonardi, a 3-story marble-fronted structure nestled near the quieter bend of the Grand Canal. The name was etched in gold leaf above the archway, but years of fog and salt had dulled it into something more honest. Tarnished, fading, fragile. In his coat pocket, the winged lion token felt heavier than it should, like it knew where it belonged. Inside, the gallery was hushed and cold, the kind of curated silence money could buy. Spotlights hung like judgment above the artwork, many of them turned off. Half the walls bore frames with no paintings, only faint outlines of where they once hung. A woman in heels clipped briskly past, offering only a polite nod. Luca ignored her. His eyes were drawn instead to the large oil canvas near the rear, a chaotic swirl of reds and golds, centered by an empty hook. Another missing piece. He pulled out his notepad and began cross-referencing the gallery's public catalog with what was actually on display. At least 7 works were unaccounted for, some recent acquisitions, some listed as loaned, a few marked under restoration. He didn't buy it. Leonardi's name had come up in art crime circles before, always peripherally, always clean. A generous donor, passionate collector, a man with taste and protection. But the token in Luca's pocket told a different story. The winged lion, symbol of St. Mark, had long been Venice's sigil. But this version, the crowned lion with a split halo and a missing scroll, wasn't ecclesiastical. It was sectarian. He'd first seen it years ago on the spine of a book confiscated during a smuggling sting. That book had pages cut out with surgical precision. Beneath its cover had been rolled blueprints of underground vaults beneath Venice. None of them listed in any municipal archive. And now the same symbol had surfaced again, in cold espresso and shadowed conversations. He didn't believe in coincidences. Back at his office that afternoon, Luca began building the suspect web. Marco Leonardi sat at the center, a patron of the arts, yes, but also a man with roots buried deep in Venice's nobility. Old money, older secrets. 3 former restorers who had worked under Leonardi were dead. One of cancer, one of an overdose, and the last had simply disappeared. The name? Giuseppe Rinaldi. The name from the cup. Coincidence cracked and gave way to purpose. Luca drew a red circle around Leonardi's name and connected it to a new thread, La Fratellanza del Remo, or the Brotherhood of the Oar. A clandestine network of gondoliers whispered to operate beyond tradition. Keepers of Venetian secrets. Smugglers. Silent watchers. Some said they were body disposers during the plague. Others believed they'd evolved into something stranger. The token's engraving, its intricate lion, had been found on one of their ceremonial oars during an investigation into a sunken gondola near the Arsenal district 2 years ago. Back then, Luca had dismissed it as symbolic trash. Now he wasn't so sure. He pulled up the gallery's guest list for last month's private showing. Among the names, Aria Fontana, listed as caterer. She hadn't mentioned that. Eduardo Ferri, gondolier turned private tour operator, formerly arrested for smuggling sketches under false deckboards. Bianca Serra, professor of Venetian maritime history. And of course Marco Leonardi, host. The painting that had gone missing that night? A depiction of the Riva degli Schiavoni, painted by an anonymous 17th century artist, with an unusual detail. In the corner, a lion-headed figure holding a bleeding key. Luca underlined the phrase, bleeding key. He felt the pattern forming, quiet and inevitable, like condensation on a glass. The lion, the key, the cup, all signs pointed toward Leonardi, and toward something buried in Castello, something Venice itself had tried to forget. Luca closed his notes and checked his watch. Time to meet the man behind the missing art. And the bitter coffee. Part 5, Palazzo Intrigue. The Palazzo Leonardi didn't rise, it loomed. Set off a quiet stretch of canal behind the Arsenal. The building was more fortress than home. Its facade, streaked with centuries of rain and salt, bore no nameplate, just a lion head knocker on a door too large for modern visitors. Luca rapped once. The door creaked open, not by a servant, but on its own. Or so it seemed. Inside, the foyer opened into an antechamber layered in shadows. Tapestries dulled by time hung heavy on the walls. The scent of old varnish and overpolished lies clung to the air. And then footsteps. Marco Leonardi emerged from behind a carved mahogany door, wearing a velvet housecoat and the effortless confidence of someone used to hiding in plain sight. "Detective Verdi," he said warmly, as though greeting an old friend. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Your name came up in connection to a missing man. And a cold coffee." Leonardi chuckled softly. "Venice and its obsessions. Art. Secrets. Caffeine. He gestured toward a hallway. Shall we discuss it over a cup? I have something aged, like good betrayal. Luca hesitated but nodded. Lead the way. They passed through a gallery hallway lined with decayed canvases, each one meticulously preserved in its brokenness. One painting, split at the middle, was held together with gold staples, as if wounds could be healed with vanity. Luca's gaze stopped at a painting of the Riva degli Schiavoni, now restored, now framed, now returned to its place. Leonardi noticed. Ah, you have a good eye. That one was missing for a while. Stolen, loaned, misplaced. Things shift in Venice. So do people. Luca stepped closer to the painting and saw it, the plaster beneath the frame, chipped recently, dust still curling at the edge. Freshly disturbed. He said nothing. Leonardi led him into a vaulted salon, where two armchairs faced each other beside an antique fireplace. Between them stood a silver carafe, steamless but polished to a mirror finish. Leonardi poured into two small cups. The liquid was thick, black as lacquer, and unervingly cold. An old family blend, Leonardi said. We let it rest. The bitterness improves with time. Luca lifted the cup. The scent hit first, coppery, oily, wrong. He sipped. It was awful metallic, as if the grounds had been filtered through oxidized iron. Leonardi watched him with a pleasant smile. Tastes like memory, doesn't it? Luca forced a swallow and set the cup down. In his coat pocket, the lion token vibrated, no tremor of hand or ground, just the coin, resonating. His pulse quickened. Tell me, Luca said slowly, what do you know about the Order of the Lion's Wing? Leonardi's smile flickered, then returned. Ah, the bedtime stories of gondoliers and archivists. Surely you're not chasing ghosts, detective. Ghosts don't leave tokens behind, Luca replied. Neither do wise men. Leonardi stood and walked toward a window. Venice is layered, like sediment. You scratch one surface, another bleeds through. The Order is just one of many old myths. They punished those who sold the city's soul. Thieves of beauty, vandals in suits. And you, Luca asked, what do you sell? Leonardi turned back. His eyes glinted. I preserve. He said it too quickly, too cleanly. Luca excused himself, citing a need for the restroom. Leonardi waved him toward a side corridor. In the mirror above the sink, Luca splashed his face with cold water and rubbed at his temples. Then he saw it. On the back of his right hand, faint but unmistakable, beneath the sheen of water, a mark, circular, radiating lines like a lion's mane. The same symbol engraved into the token. He hadn't drawn it. He hadn't seen it before. But now it was there as if awakened. He dried his hand quickly, heart pounding. Back in the salon, Leonardi was sitting again, swirling his untouched cup. Luca returned, outwardly calm. But inside, a realization had taken hold. He'd been marked, whether as a threat, an invitation, or a warning, he didn't yet know. But the game had escalated, and Leonardi was no longer a suspect. He was part of the board. Part 6 Bitter Brew. The silver carafe still gleamed between them, a quiet referee in a match neither acknowledged. Luca stared at his half-finished espresso. Its surface had stilled into a glassy sheen, dark and unnatural, like the eye of something watching back. Leonardi lifted his own cup, eyes never leaving Luca's. Tell me, he said, voice smooth, do you believe in ancient debts? Luca took a moment. I believe in unpaid ones, he replied. Leonardi chuckled, low and dry. Well said, and very Venetian. He sipped, delicately. No flinch, no sign of poison. But Luca had already tasted it, and something was off. It wasn't just the bitterness, nor the strange iron tang. It was the aftertaste, the one that didn't leave. Like it wanted to root itself under the tongue, like it recognized him. He shifted in his seat. In his pocket, the winged lion token vibrated again. Sharper this time, not like a hum, like a warning. He kept his hand pressed against it, feeling the steady pulse of metal on bone. Leonardi set his cup down gently, as though it contained confession. You know, he said, my father believed the real city of Venice wasn't what you see above the water, but what you feel beneath it. Damp guilt and rot? Leonardi smiled. History doesn't poison people, Luca said. Doesn't it? Leonardi's eyes narrowed. Tell that to the people who drank from lead-line chalices, or who read cursed books out loud, or traded beauty for profit. Luca said nothing. Leonardi leaned back, fingers steepled. The order believes every cup tells a story. The bitterness is earned, sometimes deserved. Is that what this is? Luca gestured toward his drink. Judgment, perspective. The silence that followed was long, too long. Luca stood. I think I've had enough. Leonardi nodded, rising as well. The best cups are rarely finished. As Luca turned to leave, the token in his pocket grew hot. For a flicker of a second, not warm, hot. He pulled it out instinctively and saw it. A glow from the groove on its back, a faint ember-red shimmer pulsing like breath. He turned it in his palm, then froze. A reflection in the polished metal of the token. On the back of his hand, clearer now in the ambient light, the mark had deepened. From faint impression to etched symbol. It looked like it had always been there, just hidden beneath the skin. A lion's mane encircling an unblinking eye. Luca clenched his fist, slid the token back into his coat. Thank you for your hospitality, he said. Leonardi inclined his head. If you find any more names, he said, let me know. I collect them. Luca didn't look back. Out on the steps of the palazzo, the fog had begun to rise. Venice shifted around him, fluid and breathing. He exhaled slowly, the bitter taste still clinging to his throat. And in that bitterness, a question whispered. Was he now part of something? Or merely marked for elimination? Part 7, Salon Secrets. The morning light in Venice had a way of lying. It cast gold onto rot, shimmered across cracked windows, painted elegance over exhaustion. But beneath all that shimmer, the city still groaned under the weight of its own secrets. Luca found Aria Fontana opening her café in Campo Santa Maria Formosa, her movements sharp and tired. She jumped at the sound of his approach, nearly dropping a jar of beans. Luca, she hissed, you shouldn't be here. He held up his hand, palm out, fingers slightly spread. There, on the back of his skin, no longer subtle, no longer hiding, was the mark. Aria paled. Her hands trembled. Dio mio, she whispered. You drank it. I had to, he said. No one drinks the second cup. Luca followed her into the back room, past the shelves of imported blends and family relics. She bolted the door behind them. Tell me what this is, he demanded. The token, the mark, the taste. Aria sat down slowly, as if her legs would betray her if she didn't. She opened a small wooden box beneath the counter. Inside was a brittle old menu, faded and stained. It listed drinks, yes, but next to each item were tiny symbols, each one a variation of the lion. I thought it was a game, she said. A weird tradition from before my time. Customers would ask for the red mane or winged claw. I only learned what it meant when one of them never came back. And left behind. She reached into a teacup on a nearby shelf, plucked out a tarnished metal coin, the same as Luca's. They call themselves the Order of the Lion's Wing, she said quietly. Not a cult, not exactly, more like a court, a justice that the Republic buried and forgot. They believe beauty stolen from Venice must be paid for. Luca frowned. Paid how? With blood? Or silence? Aria pulled a faded pamphlet from a drawer, old enough to crack when opened. It was written in Venetian dialect, scribbled over with annotations. An image showed a winged lion gripping a cup between its claws. The words, per ogni furto, unsorso, for every theft, a sip. He tapped the mark on his hand. So what does this mean? Am I a thief? No, she said, eyes locked to his. You're a witness now, and maybe a judge. The phrase felt wrong in his ears, but the token still burned faintly in his pocket. as if agreeing. They worked in silence for the next hour, surrounded by the smells of ground beans and paper rot. Luca spread out everything. His photos of the coffee stain, the cipher from the canal cup, even the gallery guest list. He and Arya began to trace the history. Names connected to missing art, auctions without provenance, paintings that had vanished and reappeared in private hands. Pattern emerged. Each person who disappeared had at one time either profited from, covered up, or laundered stolen Venetian artifacts. And in the margins of these records, scratched in by unseen hands, the same three symbols repeated: lion, cup, mark. Luca finally said it aloud. They think they're restoring balance. No, Arya said bitterly. They think they're the last ones allowed to judge. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen and turned pale. Blocked number, she said, voice low. Just one message. Luca took the phone and read it. Midnight, Rialto Bridge. No signature, no explanation. He felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. This wasn't a clue. It was a summons. And whatever waited there tonight beneath the arches of the oldest bridge in Venice, it would not be a polite conversation over coffee. Part 8, Midnight Rendezvous. The Rialto Bridge under moonlight was a skeleton of its daytime self. No merchants, no tourists, only stone and shadow. Venice felt older at midnight, as if the ghosts of the lagoon came closer to the surface, surfacing in the gaps between footsteps. Luca stood beneath the arch, collar up against the wind off the water, breath shallow. He checked his watch. 11:58. No one. Then, at exactly midnight, something caught his eye. Balanced on the stone balustrade was a paper cup, plain white, still steaming faintly. Luca moved toward it, half expecting it to disappear like a mirage. But it didn't. It was real. He touched it. Warm. On the cup's rim, a handwritten word in smudged ink. Guarda. Look. Luca took a careful sip. Bitter. Same metallic edge he now associated with danger. He peered inside, and there, floating in the dark surface tension of the brew, was a slip of paper, tightly coiled and starting to unfurl. He fished it out, flattened it under his palm. Letters revealed themselves. Look beneath what reflects your face. He froze, then turned slowly to the canal below. The water reflected his silhouette in warped fragments. The moonlight rippled off the Grand Canal like broken glass. He knelt, scanning the murky surface. There, something below. Faint outline. Square. Iron. He followed the edge of the embankment and found a narrow staircase descending toward the waterline, half submerged at this hour. Shoes soaked, Luca climbed down. The smell was pungent, algae and diesel and copper. Then he saw it. A rusted iron grate, barely visible below the lapping tide. He squinted. Inside, tucked behind the bars, something metallic glinted. He pulled out his penknife, wedged it under the lip of the grate, and pried. The metal groaned like a dying gondola. His fingers reached inside. Slime. Something sharp. Then his hand closed around a cold, damp object. He yanked it out. A small notebook, bound in cracking red leather. Waterlogged but intact. It was heavier than it looked, and it hummed with a kind of tension, like it remembered being buried. He didn't open it yet. Not here. Suddenly, he stiffened. Someone was watching. He turned. On the bridge above, a shadow shifted, too tall to be casual, too still to be unintentional. No movement, no face. The steam from the cup had vanished. So had the warmth. Luca tucked the notebook into his coat, fingers trembling, and backed into the night. He didn't know it yet, but the list of the dead had just landed in his hands, and he was already on it. Part 9, Pages of the Damned. Back in his cramped office above the canal, Luca peeled off his soaked coat and dropped it by the radiator. The notebook, still cold, sat on the desk, beating moisture onto his papers. He stared at it. It was bound in thin red leather, worn smooth around the edges, the corners water-gnawed. No title, just a faint embossed outline of a lion's claw on the front. No eye, no wings, just the claw, as if it kept something locked inside. Luca exhaled, cracked his knuckles, and opened it. The first page was blank, except for a delicate circle drawn in dried ink, hand-stamped, almost ritualistic. Inside it, a single Latin phrase, Nomen tenebris, premium veritas. Name the darkness, reward the truth. He flipped. The next dozen pages were a list of names, written in looping calligraphic script. Each name followed by a date, and then a small symbol, some a lion's head, others a cup, and a few marked only by an X. At first glance, they meant nothing. Then he saw it. Giuseppe Rinaldi. Next to his name, 2004. Cup symbol. Luca's pulse kicked. He scanned down the page. Names he'd never heard. Then more recent ones, art restorers, museum curators, private collectors. Each name cross-referenced with dates tied to scandals or sudden disappearances. And the most disturbing part? The last entry was blank. Just a line waiting for a name. And below it, in smaller handwriting, a single word. Stasera. Tonight, he felt ice bloom in his spine. The notebook wasn't a record. It was a sentence log. These weren't just deaths. They were judgments. And tonight, someone new would be judged. He turned to the last inserted page. There, wedged into the binding, was a torn sketch, charcoal, hurried. A figure in silhouette. Tall, cloaked, curved or resting on one shoulder. A gondolier. But not any gondolier. The hat was missing. The face was featureless. Yet the posture, the aura, felt impossibly old. Beneath the sketch, one word, Remator, the Roman. He stared at the face, at the absence of one. It was the kind of drawing that didn't depict something, it remembered it. Outside, the canal lapped louder than before. Luca walked to the window, half expecting to see the black curve of a gondola rising from the fog. But nothing moved. Then a soft creak, not from the water, from the wooden floorboards in the hallway. He grabbed his revolver and moved toward the door. Slowly, pressed his ear to the wood. Another step, closer. He yanked the door open, gun raised. Empty hallway, silence, until, faintly from somewhere far below, a single or dipped into water. Smooth, rhythmic, measured. He shut the door, locked it, then turned to his desk. The notebook lay open again, though he hadn't touched it. Now, written below the blank line, in wet ink that hadn't been there a minute ago. El Verdi. The pen dropped from his hand. He was no longer just the detective. He was the next name. Part 10, Pursuit Through Canals. Luca didn't sleep. Not that night. Not after seeing his own name inked into judgment. He packed the notebook into a waterproof pouch, clipped it inside his coat. Every instinct screamed at him to leave the city. Catch a train, disappear into the Alps, vanish. But Venice didn't let go. It followed you, through your veins, your breath, your dreams. At 3:41 a.m., he heard the sound again. The soft dip of a wooden oar. Not in rhythm. Not a gondolier's usual cadence. Slower, purposeful, like someone marking time. He stood at the office window. Fog smeared the Grand Canal like milk. Then movement. From beneath the Ponte di Rialto, a black gondola emerged. No tourist lantern. No gold embellishment. Just matte black wood that swallowed the moonlight. And standing in it, a lone figure. Tall, cloaked, motionless. Even from above, Luca couldn't see a face. He backed from the window, grabbed his coat, his gun, and the notebook. Then fled down the narrow staircase into the calle below. The moment his feet hit the stone, he heard it again. Splash, creak, splash, creak. The gondola was following. He didn't wait. He bolted down the alley, boots slick against wet stone. Turned right, then left, past shuttered shops, ancient churches, the ghost glow of crucifixes lit in windows. He knew the path, knew which calle would curve toward Campo San Polo. If he reached the small footbridge, he could lose whoever it was. But the sounds behind him never quickened. They didn't have to. The gondola moved without obstruction, like it knew a shorter path, like Venice itself conspired against him. He took the bridge 2 steps at a time, heart hammering. From the corner of his eye, down a side canal, the gondola, already there, He froze. No rower moved. Yet the vessel glided. And then it began to turn slowly to face him. No waves. No wake. Just that prow pointed like a blade, aimed at his chest. He turned and ran again. A back alley. Another. A low arch. He stumbled into a small courtyard surrounded by crumbling walls. Only one way out, another bridge. But as he reached it, a groan of wood echoed across the water. Behind him, the gondola pulled in silently, rubbing against the canal's edge. No one stepped out, but the air got colder. The token in his pocket buzzed. Not a warning, more like an alert, or a trigger. Luca reached into his coat and pulled it out. The mark on his hand began to glow faintly, barely visible like warmth beneath the skin. The lion's mane pulsed with each heartbeat. A shadow stirred on the bridge. He raised his weapon, but there was nothing there. Only fog, water, wood, then a splash. He turned. The notebook pouch had been unzipped, but his coat was still closed. His breath caught. He checked the notebook, still there, but now tucked inside the front cover. A feather, black, drenched, still dripping. He backed away slowly, then sprinted across the bridge into the next calle, not stopping until he reached the shelter of Aria's café. He slammed the door shut, bolted it, and collapsed against the wall. Not dead, not yet, but something had touched him, and whatever it was, it didn't row like a man. It moved like it had waited for centuries. Part 11 Maritime Ledger. At dawn, the lagoon shimmered like brushed metal. Too still, too calm. It always looked peaceful just before something surfaced. Luca rang the brass bell outside the Archivio Navale, a decaying naval archive near the Arsenal docks. Ivy crawled up the limestone, strangling plaques. The door creaked open, revealing a hunched woman in a dark cardigan with pince-nez glasses perched low. "Detective Verdi," she greeted. "You've seen it, haven't you?" "Bianca Serra," he replied, nodding. "I need help decoding history." She stepped aside wordlessly. Inside, the archive smelled of salt, dust, and rust. Shelves bowed under ship logs, death ledgers, and salvage maps. She guided him past glass cases containing rusted compasses and nautical charms. "I had a dream about you last night," she said casually. "You were rowing, but there was no water, only mirrors." Luca didn't answer. He placed the notebook on her table and opened it to the charcoal sketch of the gondolier. Bianca leaned closer. "That's the Rimator Nero," she whispered. "The Black Roman. He's older than gondolas themselves." She pulled a thick, bound volume from the shelf labeled Morti in Laguna, 1630 to 1699. There was a gondolier in 1666, never named, who ferried plague victims between islands under moonlight. But after the plague ended, people kept disappearing. Smugglers, priests, art thieves. The ledger listed the dead, but no one could find their bodies. She flipped to an entry. 1674, undelivered cargo. Black boat seen near Giudecca. No survivors. Some say he became more than a man. A consequence, Bianca said. A force that delivers justice. Luca tapped the page. Why would the Order adopt this imagery? Bianca removed a parchment map and spread it out. Because they didn't adopt him. They serve him. She traced a triangle on the map, 3 coordinates across the lagoon. These are ritual sites, hidden crypts, submerged tombs, and one beneath a collapsed chapel off Torcello. All places where the Order is rumored to meet. "Oh, dispose." Luca leaned in. "Dispose of what?" "Of those who betray Venice," she said. "By theft, silence, or profit." She slid a second book toward him. A maritime burial ledger, brittle and water-stained. Inside, he found names from his notebook, but these were dated decades apart. The pattern was clear. Every 9 to 11 years, a cluster of deaths, each body buried beneath forgotten parts of the lagoon, listed not as murder victims, but offerings or reclaimed debt. Bianca turned a final page. "Look here," she said. "There's a coordinate noted without a name." Luca read it aloud. 45.4478 degrees north, 12.3412 degrees east. Bianca handed him a flashlight. Go at night. Go alone. If it's truly active again, that's where the cup will appear next. He paused. The cup? She nodded. They leave it behind after every judgment. Luca took the coordinate down, heart pounding. If this ledger was correct, someone would die tonight. Unless he interrupted the ritual. He turned to leave. Detective, Bianca said softly. If you see him, the Black Roman, don't speak. Don't even breathe. Just watch. And then leave. He paused at the threshold. Why? She didn't smile. Because if he ever looks back, it means your name is next. Part 12, Buried Beneath the Waves. Venice held its breath that night. The tide was low, revealing staircases and stones that hadn't seen moonlight in years. Luca rowed alone, a rented bateau slicing the water like a scalpel. His hands ached from the cold. His mind, sharp, focused, counted strokes as if each one pushed him further from death or closer to it. The coordinate from Bianca's ledger led to San Pietro di Castello, one of Venice's oldest churches, long abandoned in the public eye, but never forgotten by the order. He moored the boat beside a crumbling dock and followed a moss-slick path behind the chapel ruins. Ivy tangled around ancient stones. Candles, fresh, half-burned, lined the narrow staircase descending beneath the altar. He drew his flashlight. The beam danced over melted wax, scratch marks on stone, and a lingering smell. Coffee and decay. Deeper in, the air grew wet, then splashing. Not his own. He reached the subterranean crypt. Half-flooded. Pillars rose like drowned trees, their roots submerged. Candle stubs flickered atop skull-lined alcoves. The walls pulsed with age. And in the water, drifting like forgotten thoughts, small wooden coffins, each no longer than a violin case. At least 24, bobbing softly, each lid carved with a name and date. Luca waded in, the cold cut through his bones. He passed. G. Rinaldi, 2004. E. Costanzo, 1996. M. Vitali, 1985. And so on. Every name from the notebook was here. This wasn't symbolic. This was a burial chamber. At the center of the flooded chamber sat a stone slab, just above water level. Resting on it, perfectly still, was a steaming cup of coffee. Fresh. Impossible. He approached, each step rippling the reflection. The cup was porcelain, white with a thin gold band. Elegant. Aristocratic. But within, no sugar, no crema. Just black bitterness, swirling. He lifted it. A single letter was etched on the inside. ML. His stomach turned. Marco Leonardi. Behind the slab on the far wall, a canvas had been nailed crookedly, paint peeling but unmistakable. It was one of the missing artworks from Leonardi's private collection. A stolen fresco fragment depicting St. Mark's lion with a blood-red tongue. He connected it all at once. The victims weren't random. They were art dealers, collectors, forgers, those who sold Venice's soul for profit. Each cup marked a death. Each death a repayment. The faint sound echoed. Drip, drip, step. Not water, not his own movement. He turned slowly, weapon raised. Between the pillars, a shadow moved. Not rushing, not hiding, just present. His flashlight flickered, and from the far side of the crypt, something emerged. A hooded figure, robes soaked, face hidden, gliding just above the waterline like gravity had forgotten them. Luca didn't breathe. The figure didn't speak. But it watched, then pointed, not at him, at the wall behind the slab. He turned. Another fresco, nearly erased, showed a masked man rowing across the Styx, ferrying not souls, but coffins. The same shape, same size. The order wasn't just enacting vengeance. They were offering tribute. When he turned back, the figure was gone. Only the cup remained, now cold in his hand. He left the chamber without a word, without looking back. But in his coat pocket, the token hummed again. And for the first time, it felt like a heartbeat. Part 13, Cup of Confession. Luca laid the porcelain cup on his desk as if it were a relic excavated from a tomb. In a way, it was The initial ML gleamed inside like an accusation. The name repeated in his head, Marco Leonardi. But why now? He pulled the red leather notebook from its pouch. Pages stuck together from water damage, but most of the writing remained legible. Ink bled in patterns that looked like bruises. He turned to the last few entries. G. Rinaldi delivered. E. Costanzo reclaimed. Then, blank, save for one word scrawled in a larger hand. Tonight, there was no name, just a sketch. A gondolier again, but this time holding a cup, not an oar. And in the water around him, paintings, frames, canvas scraps, sinking. Luca remembered the artwork nailed behind the crypt slab, the fragment that matched the ledger. These weren't just victims. They were traders of culture, merchants who bled Venice of her soul, canvas by canvas, sold under falsified provenance, shipped across oceans in crates lined with lies. And Marco Leonardi? He wasn't just a collector. He was a curator of theft. Luca went back through his files, cross-referencing auction sales tied to Leonardi's gallery. Every name matched a coffin in the crypt. It wasn't random. It was systematic. Each victim had profited from stolen or forged Venetian art, and now they were buried underwater in silence near the treasures they helped destroy. His hand brushed the token, pulsed faintly. He turned it over. For the first time, he noticed tiny initials engraved beneath the lion's paw, SPV. He didn't recognize them, but when he held it near the cup, the token warmed, almost imperceptibly. Then he heard it, a sound, not from outside, from the mirror. He turned slowly, eyes locking on his own reflection. And there, just beneath his jawline, something shimmered. He leaned in, a mark, the same sigil from before, faint like old bruising, now clearer, glowing like an ember beneath the skin. Not a symbol of warning, a seal. He had been claimed. A judge? A witness? Participant? He didn't know. But he knew this. Leonardi wasn't killing for money, or revenge alone. He was purging history, one stolen name at a time. And the next name wasn't just in the notebook. It was in Leonardi's mind. Luca reached for his phone. He had to find him now. But before he could dial, the screen blinked. A text appeared without a sender. Just one word, confess. Then coordinates, a palazzo. And the hour midnight. Again. Part 14, Unmasked Ally. The palazzo was supposed to be empty. At least, that's what Luca thought as he slipped through its back courtyard. Footsteps echoing against cracked marble. Ivy strangled the pillars like old guilt. A breeze from the Grand Canal carried the scent of mildew and sea salt. He passed through an arched corridor, flashlight steady. That's when she stepped out of the dark. No sound, just presence. A woman in her 40s, raincoat dark as the shadows. A glint of copper hair beneath her hood. She didn't flinch when Luca raised his pistol, only tilted her head, as if expecting it. Elena Russo, she said calmly. Luca blinked. The archivist? I used to be. She pulled the hood down. Her eyes were tired, pages of regret bound in flesh. I worked at the Fondazione Loredan, she continued, digitizing stolen art registries. Names, provenance, red tags. You'd be surprised how often the same collectors appeared. Always with new identities. But the same hunger. You knew Leonardi? She hesitated. Not personally, but his name came up. His gallery handled pieces that should have been in museums, not mansions. Luca kept the pistol lowered, but ready. And you didn't speak out? I wanted to. She looked away. But they came to me. The order. She nodded. I thought they were just a myth. Winged lions, old oaths, espressos with blood on the rim. Fantasy. Until they left a cup on my doorstep. She rolled up her sleeve. The same sigil burned faintly into her skin. They marked me, she said, but I didn't die. I think they wanted me to watch, to remember. Why now? Luca asked. Why come to me? Elena reached into her satchel and unfolded a yellowed map, brittle at the creases. Because tonight isn't just another kill, she said. Leonardi's making a statement. She pointed to a symbol, an inked lion guarding a spiral staircase. This palazzo, marked centuries ago as a vault of silence, the final hiding place for artifacts too cursed or too valuable to ever surface again. She met his gaze. And I think that's where he's taking you. Luca narrowed his eyes. You think I'm next? No, she said quietly. I think he wants you to choose. She stood, brushing dust off her coat. I can help. I've got access to the Order's digitized records, ritual calendars, dead drops, codes. You still kept it all? He asked. She smiled, thin and bitter. Guilt has a good memory. Luca pocketed the map. We work together, he said. But no secrets. She nodded. One secret left, she admitted, voice softer now. Leonardi's real motive is not vengeance. Not really. Then what? She inhaled, steadying herself. He believes Venice is a living entity, and each stolen artifact is a wound. Every victim, a stitch. Luca's pulse quickened. Elena continued. He doesn't think he's punishing the guilty. He thinks he's healing the city. Outside, a bell tolled midnight. Elena handed him a pair of coordinates, one marked in ink, the other scratched in blood. Part 15, Palazzo of Shadows. The rain had stopped, but the city still dripped. Luca and Elena stood before the iron gates of Palazzo della Morte, unlisted on modern maps, yet inked clearly on the parchment she'd handed him hours earlier. Leonardi owns this place? Luca asked, voice low. Elena nodded. Technically, it's in the name of a restoration trust. But follow the money. The palazzo loomed above them like a mausoleum. Windows shuttered. The lion carvings on its facade eroded into grimaces. Time had not been kind, but it had been silent. Luca picked the lock. The door opened with the soft reluctance of something long unbothered. They stepped inside. The air was thick, dust, mold, coffee. A large chamber opened before them. Walls lined with mismatched art crates. Shipping labels faded. Some marked from Milan, others from as far as Peru and Kyoto. Canvas corners peeked from broken wood. And in the center of the room, a long marble table, dark-veined, cracked at the edges. Atop it, nothing but a silver tray, 2 cups, untouched. Cold coffee. Again. No steam, no aroma, just presence. This feels like a trap, Elena murmured. It is, Luca said. But sometimes traps bait answers. He stepped forward. The table's surface caught his eye. Not smooth, carved. Faint etchings ran along its length, shallow as breath. Symbols, letters, interlocking lines. He wiped dust away, revealing what appeared to be a cipher grid, like a Venetian enigma, inscribed by hand. Elena examined it closely. This isn't just art. It's placement. Look. She pointed to spots where paintings had once been mounted, faint rectangular outlines above the walls. Each spot aligns with a letter on the grid, she whispered. Luca's gaze sharpened. Leonardi wasn't just collecting. He was reconstructing a message. He pulled out the notebook, flipped to the sketch of the gondolier with frames sinking into water. The missing art, the coffins, the cups, they weren't individual punishments. They were a pattern. He ran his fingers along the table, tracing a name. It formed slowly, letter by letter. Danno. Elena, he whispered. This isn't about healing. He thinks Venice is sick because of the damage I'll Danno, and he's spelling it out, one corpse at a time. Suddenly, footsteps, heavy, coming from upstairs. They froze. Elena reached into her coat. Gun. Luca shook his head. No shots. Not yet. A shadow moved at the staircase above, tall, precise, like a man used to walking museum floors. Then a voice. I wondered when you'd find it, Detective. Marco Leonardi. He descended slowly, hands behind his back, as if unveiling an exhibition. His voice calm, velvet soaked in regret. You've seen the coffins. Read the ledger. You even drank the bitter roast. Bravo. He stepped into the circle of candlelight. Now tell me, Luca, do you believe Venice deserves justice? Luca didn't lower his gun. I believe in answers first. Leonardi nodded, then gestured toward the coffee cups. Then drink, detective. Cold truth always settles at the bottom. Part 16, Confrontation in the Corridors. Luca didn't move. Neither did Leonardi. The silence inside the palazzo was heavy, like air choked with centuries of secrets. Rain tapped faintly on the high windows. Outside, Venice waited. But inside, time froze. Leonardi stepped down the last stair. He was impeccably dressed. Black vest, gold watch chain, and gloves too smooth to be casual. A gentleman, a curator, killer. I had hoped we'd meet under different terms, Leonardi said. You with questions, me with answers. A civilized arrangement. Luca kept his pistol aimed at the chest. You've killed at least 13 people. 14, Leonardi corrected gently. And each one earned their place in the water. You know that now. Elena stood rigid beside the cipher table, hand still near her coat pocket. Don't, Leonardi said softly, eyes on her. You were spared once, Archivist. Don't gamble that mercy again. She said nothing. Luca took a slow step forward. You think this is justice? I know it is, Leonardi replied. Every painting on these walls was bought with betrayal. Every auction forged, every donation a theft. These were not merchants. They were butchers of memory. He walked over to the silver tray, his movements unhurried, picked up the carafe, poured 2 cups. The dark coffee flowed thick, like oil. No poison this time, he said. I give you my word. He slid 1 cup toward Luca. Sit, drink. You've walked the path, seen the crypt, read the book. You already carry the mark. The order doesn't wait forever. Luca lowered the pistol but didn't holster it. He sat. Elena took a half-step closer to the door. Luca shot her a glance. Stay. Leonardi lifted his own cup. Didn't drink. I don't trust myself anymore, he admitted. The line between justice and vengeance. It's blurred. I offer the cup, but I no longer taste it. Convenient, Luca said coldly. Leonardi turned to the cipher grid carved into the table. This is older than you think, he murmured. Centuries of damage, one thread at a time. But the grid holds. The pattern endures. Luca looked at the untouched cup before him. The dark surface reflected the candlelight, and his own eyes. This isn't a confession, he said. No, Leonardi agreed. It's a selection. He glanced up. The next name is someone you know. Luca's chest tightened. Elena? He asked, voice sharpening. No, Leonardi said softly. She carries guilt, but not the crime. Then who? Leonardi smiled, sad, resigned. That's for you to uncover. Or not. But know this, the ledger ends in 3 nights. That's when the debt must be paid in full. If you stop me now, the last piece of the pattern dies with me. But if you wait, he leaned forward, you'll see the truth. Then he sat back, coffee cooling, eyes gleaming, waiting. Part 17, Betrayal's Aftertaste. The moment stretched too long. Luca could hear his own heartbeat, louder than the flickering candlelight, louder than the storm outside. The cup in front of him cooled, yet the tension burned. Leonardi sat perfectly still, hands folded. He hadn't touched his drink. Luca glanced at Elena. She was sweating, jaw tense, eyes flicking from Luca's cup to Leonardi's face. Then suddenly she moved. In a blur, she lunged toward Luca's holster, fingers reaching for the pistol. Luca caught her wrist just in time, twisted her arm down and shoved her back. She stumbled into a chair, panting. What the hell are you doing? He hissed. Her voice cracked. I thought, if I stopped you from shooting him, maybe he'd spare you again? Leonardi finished, his voice smooth but cutting. Elena, dear mercy is never given twice. Surely you know that. She shrank inward, ashamed. Luca turned back to Leonardi, rage simmering. So this is how you work? Fear and half promises. No, Leonardi replied. Only clarity. Every time someone drinks, they see the ledger differently. He gestured to the cup in front of Luca. It's not poison. It's memory. You've tasted the mark before. You just don't remember. Luca stared at the liquid. The surface held still. Yet it seemed to shimmer, like something alive. What happens if I drink again? He asked. You'll see what I see, Leonardi said. And maybe you'll understand what must be done. I don't trust your visions. Leonardi leaned back. Then trust this. The next name in the ledger is someone you know intimately. Pause. Someone you'd hesitate to protect. If you saw what they buried. Luca's throat dried. He remembered the blank final page in the notebook. The missing name. The final victim. His mind raced. Colleagues? Friends? Lovers? Elena? He repeated, still unsure. Leonardi shook his head. Closer than that. Then, with the calm of a man already pardoned, he reached into his coat. Luca's pistol snapped up in an instant, but Leonardi didn't draw a weapon. Instead, he produced a small envelope, sealed with a wax lion. He slid it across the table. For when the time comes, he said, you'll know. Luca didn't take it. Instead, he asked one last question. Why involve me? Leonardi's answer came swiftly. Because you've already lost faith in justice, detective. I'm simply giving you a new map. He rose from his seat and walked toward the dark corridor behind him, unhurried. Luca didn't stop him. Couldn't. The cup still sat before him. The envelope waited between them. And somewhere, in the labyrinth of Venice, someone Luca loved was about to be named. Part 18, Race Against Midnight. Venice never slept, but tonight it held its breath. Luca shoved open the palazzo doors. The lion-sealed envelope clenched tight in his hand. The ink bled into his palm from the pressure. He hadn't even noticed. Behind him, Elena called out, Where are you going? He didn't turn. To stop a murder. She caught up. We need a plan. Police. There's no time, he snapped. He gave me a deadline. Midnight. That's when the last name is taken. Elena hesitated. You don't even know who the target is. But Luca did. In his gut, it coalesced, like the aftertaste of bitter coffee finally rising to the tongue. Inspector Aldo Moretti, his former mentor, now retired, a man with too many secrets and an art collection that didn't match his pension. If Leonardi's pattern held, Aldo was next. He was the one who tipped off galleries, Luca muttered, barely believing his own voice. Back during the raids, he let a dozen paintings vanish into private hands, and we never knew why. They reached the edge of the canal. Luca scanned for a gondola, nothing. Then he spotted an old Batello moored beneath the Ponte dei Pugni. Come on, he growled, untying it. Elena hesitated. You're going by boat? You'll never make it across the lagoon in time. Watch me. He jumped in, started the motor. It coughed, sputtered, then roared. The wind ripped through his coat as the Batello surged forward, slicing the black water like a blade. Lights blurred past. Lamplight smeared in rain, Venice glowing and ghostly. He gritted his teeth. Hold on, Aldo. Behind him, Elena disappeared into shadow, her own path diverging. She had a plan too. Back at her flat near Campo San Polo, Elena powered up her ancient desktop. A string of passwords, then folders bloomed across the screen, each labeled cryptically, winged underscore ledgers, sacrament underscore maps, coffee underscore rights. She plugged in Leonardi's flash drive, stolen earlier while his back was turned. The screen flickered, then loaded an interface of encrypted documents, redacted names, and dozens of grainy photos. One folder pulsed, marked, sanctioned final list. Inside, 6 names. 5 were crossed out. 1 remained, Aldo Moretti. She copied everything to a drive, just as sirens wailed in the distance. Outside, the police were coming, but for once, she wasn't hiding. She was delivering. Meanwhile, the Batello cut through the lagoon like a dying breath. The moon cast silver streaks across the water. Luca could see the old palazzo now, Moretti's home. Dark windows. One light on the third floor. He docked fast. Jumped. Ran. The front door hung ajar. Damn it! Gun drawn, Luca climbed the stairs. Each creak screamed louder than the last. He reached the landing. Saw the door at the end of the hallway slightly open. Warm light spilling out. He stepped inside. The room was empty, except for a coffee cup on the desk, still steaming, and beside it, an envelope, wax seal unbroken. Luca approached cautiously. The envelope was addressed to Inspector Verdi. Inside, coordinates, written in red ink. He recognized the numbers immediately. They pointed to the crypt beneath San Marco Basilica. One last game. Leonardi wasn't finished. Part 19, the final cipher. The crypt beneath San Marco Basilica was never open to the public. Not officially, but Luca had spent enough nights walking where he shouldn't. With the coordinates in hand and the keys still stolen from a museum custodian months ago, he knew the way. The city above was asleep or pretending to be. Venice always knew how to look the other way. He descended the narrow spiral stairs, light from his phone casting long shadows on stone walls slick with age. At the bottom, it was cold. Still, time hung like cobwebs in the air. Before him stretched a labyrinthine crypt, arches drooping low, columns half swallowed by the earth's slow hunger. And in the center, pedestal, upon it a ceramic coffee cup, unchipped, a slip of paper curled inside. Luca approached slowly. No sound, no breath, no heartbeat but his own. He lifted the paper, scrawled in precise red ink. 45.4344 degrees north, 12.3398 degrees east. San Cristoforo Cryptum. Another set of coordinates? No. He stared closer. Numbers overlaid symbols. Each line curved into the next. It was a cipher within a cipher. His fingers trembled. He traced the shapes, layered like palimpsest. The cipher spoke one word. Specchio. Mirror. Behind him, he felt it before he heard it. Footsteps. Measured. Echoing. Certain. Luca turned, pistol raised. From the shadows emerged Marco Leonardi. Cloaked not in ceremony this time, but in dusty black, as if he had been buried and risen just for this moment. He carried no gun, only a book. The ledger, still bound in leather, its spine cracked with blood and time. So, Leonardi said quietly, "We arrive." Luca kept the gun steady. "It ends tonight." Leonardi nodded. "Yes, but not how you think." He opened the book, slowly, deliberately. Inside, the final page, the one Luca had feared. Blank no longer, written in fresh red ink. Aldo Moretti, 11:55 p.m. And underneath, Luca Verdi. Midnight. Luca's pulse spiked. Leonardi looked up. The ledger records not only who must pay, but who must choose. "You expect me to kill him? Or you?" "No," said Leonardi. "I expect you to understand." He stepped closer, pulled from his coat a small revolver, set it on the stone near the cup. "Unmarked. One bullet. You write the final name." Luca's jaw clenched. "Why me?" "Because only you saw the whole story, and because I am tired." They stood in silence. One gun, one bullet, two names. Leonardi took one last breath. "I am ready," he said. Then suddenly, movement. Leonardi lunged, not for the gun, but for Luca. A flash of metal, a hidden blade drawn from his sleeve. Luca fired on reflex. The shot rang out. Leonardi collapsed, a red bloom spreading through his chest. He dropped the ledger. Its pages fluttered, unfinished. Luca fell to one knee, the smoke from his pistol swirling like incense in the cold crypt. Leonardi gasped, blood at his lips. Now, the mirror turns. He smiled and died. Part 20, Betrayal Unveiled. Silence returned to the crypt, dense as stone. Luca stood above Leonardi's body, breath uneven, gun lowered. The blood had stopped pulsing, pooled instead, quiet and still, like the canals above. And yet, the ledger hadn't burned, hadn't vanished like some cursed relic. It was real. He picked it up, hands slick with cold sweat. Pages filled with names, dates, drawings, histories rewritten in ink and blood. Each victim cross-referenced with auction records, gallery ledgers, maritime manifests, and scrawled in the margins, debt, blood, memory. Luca turned the final page again. His name remained, Luca Verdi, midnight, but beside it, scribbled faintly in Leonardi's deteriorating hand, something new, not for death, for decision. He looked down at the man he'd just killed. Marco Leonardi's eyes, though open, stared through time. A file folder peeked from inside his coat. Luca opened it. Inside, a letter addressed to the next Verdi. He unfolded it slowly. Leonardi's handwriting was smaller here, fragile. To Luca Verdi, if you're reading this, then you've taken a life. My life. You may hate me. You should. But before you bury me, know this. My family once owned the lion mosaic at Ca Resinico. You've likely walked across it. Tourists do. But that mosaic wasn't bought, it was stolen. My grandfather was framed by a Venetian magistrate in 1932, stripped of land and name. The man who signed the order? Your great-uncle, Verdi. You see, this city is not made of stone, Luca. It is made of betrayals too old to mourn. The order was born not of vengeance, but of memory. We are the last ones who remember who paid the price. You've walked the path now. You've seen the names, the ledgers, the coffins. You've even drunk the cup. So I leave you with the only question that matters. Will you break the chain or complete the circle? There is no justice in this city. Only who keeps the record. ML. Luca sat down on the crypt steps. Let the letter rest in his lap. It made sense now, the careful selection of victims, the symbols in the coffee, the unsettling precision. Marco hadn't been just a killer. He'd been the record keeper. And Luca? He had become his successor. The final name in the book wasn't a death sentence. It was an inheritance. He heard footsteps above, Elena's voice calling down. Luca, are you still down there? He stood, tucking the letter into his coat, closing the ledger softly. Yes, he called back, but I don't think I came out the same. Part 21, Justice or Revenge. The bells of San Marco began to chime midnight. Each strike echoed in Luca's chest like a summons from an older Venice. A city that never truly forgets, only waits for someone to remember on its behalf. He climbed the cold, narrow stairs, the bloodied ledger still tucked beneath his coat. It was heavier now, not with weight, but with meaning. At the surface, Elena waited. Behind her, the strobing lights of police cars flickered through light mist and drizzle. Luca, she said quietly, I gave them everything. The photos, the victim names, the stolen art evidence. They know about Leonardi. He nodded, but made no move to hand over the ledger. A tall, grim-faced officer approached. Detective Verdi, we're told you have the suspect? Luca pointed behind him toward the crypt. Marco Leonardi, dead. Self-defense. This. He pulled the ledger from his coat. This is his motive. The officer took it, flipping through a few pages. So the case is closed? Luca turned to Elena. She said nothing, just rested a gentle hand on his arm. No urging, no pleading, just waiting for his choice. Leonardi had been right. Only the keeper of the record has the right to decide. Luca looked beyond them, toward the waiting gondola at the water's edge, where a figure in pale robes waited to ferry the dead away. He saw himself in that silhouette, or a possible future. He inhaled deeply. No, he said, it's not over. He took the ledger back from the officer. He deserves prosecution, but he also deserves to be remembered. Keep this ledger in the public record. Make it known. The officer frowned. That's not procedure. No, Luca replied, but it is justice. Leonardi was dead, but if the truth was buried with him, he'd win. His death would be nothing more than another footnote in a city already thick with secrets. Elena stepped beside Luca as they walked toward the exit of the basilica. Leonardi's body was carried away. No ceremony, no mourners, only water and stone, quietly absorbing his blood. The gondola drifted into the fog. Just before it disappeared, Leonardi turned, smiling, a smile of someone who had seen the ending long before anyone else had. Part 22, Echoes of the Cipher. 1 week later, Venice shimmered beneath a cold sun, all golds and grays, like a memory that refused to fade. Detective Luca Verdi walked slowly through Campo Santa Maria Formosa, footsteps merging with the flapping of pigeons and the gentle clink of porcelain at the corner café. Aria's Café. She'd reopened, as if nothing had ever happened. But her eyes, they were deeper now. Eyes that had seen things and hadn't looked away. "Café Freddo?" she asked, half teasing, half solemn. Luca nodded. She served him a chilled coffee, dark and still. He sat at the same quiet table in the corner. Across the canal, a lone gondola drifted by, no gondolier in sight. The breeze rippled the coffee's surface. As the foam settled, he saw it. A single letter, clear, deliberate. V. Not a stain, not a swirl, a mark. He didn't touch the cup right away, just stared. Then took out his phone, snapped a photo, rotated it. The V sat within a circle, familiar. Venetian catacombs. He'd seen it once before. A marginal note in an ancient city plan. A web of tunnels beneath Venice that no one dared to map. Leonardi was dead, but something was not. The order, perhaps, or something newer, or worse, something older than them both. Luca exhaled, fingers brushing the cup. A chill climbed his spine. Behind the counter, Aria wiped down a table, but her eyes were on him, not with fear, but with a knowing calm, like she understood what he would do next. Luca stood, dropped a few euros beside the cup, pulled out his notebook. First line, V begin at bones. Trace downward. No smile, no hesitation. He turned and walked north, toward the edge of the city, where the streets ended, and the silence began.